welcome to Investigative Gaming. This is my autopsy of Shadow of the Colossus, Fumito Ueda's follow-up to his debut with Ico. So one thing I think I'll say is that I'm not a big fan of sequels, and I'm really glad that Ueda was never forced to make a sequel to Ico or a sequel to Shadow of the Colossus. I feel like it's good to have that freedom to explore new ideas. But at the same time, there are many ways in which Shadow of the Colossus is an evolution from Ico. A very noticeable thing is actually in the controls. They share almost an identical control scheme. But one of the things I know they've said when they were thinking of, a concept for this game was that in Ico, a lot of your moment-to-moment rewards were just these beautiful vistas, these large-scale, for the time, just sights of scenery. So they wanted to make a game that was full of that and had a lot more of that, and that's kind of where the open world came from. But also, I know Ueda really just wanted to make something that was a bit more exciting. For all its successes, Ico was not a particularly thrilling game. And so he's said in interviews before that putting to use his self-coined design by subtraction, he thought of what is generally the most thrilling part of a video game. And an obvious answer is boss fights. Boss fights are generally like a distillation of the best parts of a game's mechanics. So most folks who've played this game will refer to it as a game of 16 boss fights and nothing else. And really that was, in fact, the point. That was exactly what they were going for. So I think that allowed them to put a lot more focus into just creating a larger variety of bosses and just really, really exploring the possibilities of the mechanics of the game. Although it's definitely very interesting that some mechanics go almost entirely unused. One thing a viewer pointed out during the playthrough is that the only time you ever actually use your sword swing as opposed to a stab is on one Colossus, Colossus number 12, to hit its little teeth on the top of its head. I think a lot of that is really just for purposes of immersion, to make it more almost simulation-like, in that you're playing as this character rather than playing a game. And that's good, I think, because the game really succeeds at making you feel like you're in this space, and even though the bosses are very strictly like puzzle based, it's not some action based combat game. It doesn't feel like some sort of obstacle course, and the bosses don't feel like these puzzle cubes you have to solve. It does feel like you are having to go stand up against these giant beasts and hunt them down. That's I think a good way to put it, is that it feels like you're hunting them rather than solving a puzzle, despite the fact that you are in fact just solving a puzzle. But I'd like to talk about the major theme of this game, and I think most importantly, how it relates to Ico. See, everyone who's played this game, everyone knows the big plot twist, the idea that, you came to try to bring this girl back to life, and in doing so, you sort of accidentally resurrect this demon or, evil god or whatever, whatever Dorman is. But if you, actually observe the dialogue and the details of your surroundings and everything and what's actually going on, there are a lot of clues showing you that what you're doing is not something that should be done. The fact that the land itself is forbidden. The fact that the colossi themselves are largely non-hostile. They'll defend themselves, yes, but as seen right at the beginning against the first one, it walks right by you and doesn't really pay any attention to you until you act aggressively toward it. Some of them, even then, don't attack you at all. Most notably, Colossus 13, the giant flying snake in the desert, will not attack you in any way whatsoever. Meanwhile, this whole time you're witnessing Dorman being maybe not personified by, but he's always accompanied by these shadow creatures, right? He's described as being able to control creatures made from light, right? And he's every time he's speaking, you're looking up at the light coming through the ceiling. But to put it plainly, shadows are, in a way, created by light. And that was definitely what they were going for, showing that he controls these shadow creatures because he is, in a way, a god of light. And if you look a bit deeper into the details, there's evidence suggesting that, he's a god of light and darkness. There's the duality of his persona, or their persona, I should say, because it's a man and a female voice. So there are details, right? There's things like every time you defeat a Colossus, the main character, the Wanderer, gets shadow tendrils absorbed into him. He gets an extra shadow person standing over him when he awakes at the temple. The female voice coming from the light at the end of the dark tunnel when you're being transported back to the temple gets more prominent. And although I don't actually remember how it was in the original, it's totally absent in the remake of the game, unfortunately. But in the original version of the game, the light at the end of the tunnel either became larger as it went on or smaller as it went on. And I think it got larger. I want to say it got larger. But either way, it's there to represent this shift in balance. And so the idea is that the dark side of Dorman is going into the Wanderer, whereas the light side of Dorman is going into Mono, the girl. And that's how she's being revived from the dead. Meanwhile, you see things like the Wanderer's skin becomes more gray, and his hair goes from gradually from red to black, until at the very end, he looks straight up like a zombie. He's got very gray skin. He's got horns coming out of his head, an allusion not only to Dorman, who, when resurrected, has large horns, but also the allusion to Eco, where the horns were a sign of a curse. And so over the course of the game, it's supposed to become more and more apparent that maybe you shouldn't be killing these colossi, right? But let's think back for a second to Eco. Eco was a game that essentially was all about holding on. If you had to put the idea into the fewest words, I would say it was holding on. And that was a major function of the game too, right? You hold R1 to hold Yorda's hand, and you hold on to hope that you can get out of the castle. You hold on to one another, you reach out to each other, and by the end, you hold on to hope that you will survive, and that she will survive. It's simple, but effective. So, in Shadow of the Colossus, you start the game with a dead female companion, and hope that you can bring her back to life. And you have this game with, as I mentioned before, a very similar control scheme. And the most important part of that control scheme is that you still use R1 to hold on. And you use that for all of your climbing. You hold on to the colossi as they're shaking, trying to shake you all over the place to get you off of them. And you go through this game killing what are these very beautiful creatures. And they're just living their lives in solitude in this land. But you're so committed to bringing back this partner of yours. You'll do whatever it takes, right? So you go one by one, being led by, this deity that you know nothing about, one by one killing these creatures and absorbing this darkness into yourself, ignoring all of that. Just persisting until you get to the end and you've been taken over entirely by darkness, by Dorman. And you see that you have been lied to, you've been betrayed. And then at the very end, you get control one last time. You're being absorbed back into this pool, but you can try to push against it. You can try to run away from it, back towards Mono, back towards the person you are trying to save so desperately this whole time, but you're not strong enough to fight against that force pulling you back. And so inevitably, the only thing you can do is hold on to the stairs or the bridge around the pool, either until you run out of stamina or until you let go. That is what this game is about letting go. And that's why, to me, Shadow of the Colossus is such an incredible game. Not only on its own, but even more so as a companion piece to Eco. They are so, diametrically opposed to each other, yet at the same time, they not only overlap, but complement each other in such an incredible way. And those ideas that serve as the fundamental point behind each game also complement each other. The hopefulness of Eco, the idea of not giving up, of holding on. Yet at the same time, Shadow of the Colossus teaches you that you need to, I guess it teaches you not to be stubborn. It teaches you to be self-aware, to understand your circumstances. Because, yes, it's good to persist if what you are doing is noble, what you're doing is right. But it's also incredibly important to understand whether or not what you are doing is right. You have to know when to let go. Thank you for joining me on my autopsy of Shadow of the Colossus. Please be sure to like and subscribe if you liked the video, and if you'd like to watch my playthroughs of each game live, you can check out my Twitch channel at twitch.tv/investigativegaming. Thanks for watching, folks.